Thank you, Laura. It's great to be with you today. I just have a question. First of all, I forgot to ask you, did you get the document that I sent you yesterday and were able to distribute that?
We didn't
Terrific.
distribute it, but I can put it in the chat.
That would be great.
Mhm.
So there are a number of quotations from different texts that I'll be citing today during this teaching. And the document that I was just referring to is just a list of those quotations so that you don't have to try to remember them or scribble them down. Hopefully that will be helpful to you. As Laura mentioned, I am a resident teacher at the Center for Contemplative Research in Crestone, Colorado. And one of the things that I do here, along with some construction management that I am now retiring from and retreats of my own, I talk with other retreaters who are in long-term retreat. And as part of my consulting or counseling obligations or duties. And so one of the things that I hear frequently is because our approach here at the Center for Contemplative Research right now is, and has been for some time, to really focus on the very deep appreciation and progress, hopefully, towards the development of shamatha, which is the single pointed attention that is a major first attainment, really, and so important in the stabilization of any other realizations that might come from any of the other practices that people undertake in Tibetan Buddhism. And so I'd like to begin talking about Vipassana practice and the Ninth Karmapa's teachings on taking appearances as the path, as a Vipassana practice, by placing that within the context of the union of shamatha and Vipassana. And it is often thought that the union of shamatha and Vipassana is really the perfect accomplishment of shamatha, followed by the perfect accomplishment of Vipassana. But that isn't necessarily so, because shamatha and Vipassana actually work together very well as antidotes for the problems that might arise in each of the other practices. So, for instance, shamatha, of course, the main problem that you will run into, or I should say that there are two main problems, actually, distraction and dullness, that are the classic and most common problems with shamatha practice, or that can arise as obstacles to your shamatha practice. And when you are really focused in, especially a long-term retreat, or the focus of your practice is shamatha, it can lead to dullness, or that the focus on stillness in shamatha practice can lead to an excess of stillness and be experienced as a dullness or laxity. And in long-term retreat, that sluggishness or dullness can produce a sense of stagnation, really, or plateauing in your practice. And on the other hand, if you are focused entirely on Vipassana practice, excitation and distraction can lead to an experience of unstable realizations of your Vipassana practice. So the two of these are actually recommended as antidotes that you can use together. And I'll so here just read something from the third Kamtrul Rinpoche in his extraordinary meditation manual, The Royal Seal of Mahamudra. In this text, he says, by the strength of shamatha, distraction ceases. Through Vipassana, it becomes like a mountain. For beginners, the meditation with these two in union has been explained as follows. If due to excessive analytical meditation and vipassana, distraction develops, one should practice shamatha. And when through excessive shamatha and meditating resting there is dullness, vipassana should be practiced. When practicing shamatha and vipassana together, one should practice truly uncontrived equanimity. And so the point here is that the two of these practices, rather than having to be totally separate, and one practiced or practiced sequentially, really, after the full attainment of shamatha, then you practice vipassana. If you practice them together, they can actually enhance each other. And so, as an antidote to sluggishness and the loss of joy that can occur when you are on that plateau of dullness, really, in a long shamatha retreat, one of my favorite Mahamudra Vipassana practices is actually one that can be applied naturally in post-meditation. And this practice comes from the Ninth Karmapa's meditation manuals, the two very famous ones, Pointing Out the Dharmakaya, and Mahamudra, the Ocean of Definitive Meaning. And in these two texts, the Vipassana or insight practices there are presented in three different approaches. The first of these, the first two of these actually are looking at the mind within stillness and looking at the mind within occurrence. And the third one is looking at the mind within appearance. And the Vipassana practice that we'll be discussing today is looking at the mind within appearance. And this is often called the four recognitions. So rather than try to cover the entire scope of the Vipassana practices in these texts, I'd like to just look at the third one, which is looking at the mind within appearance. And the particular expression of this very pithy description of looking at the mind within appearance that I'm going to read to you now is from a text called A Spacious Path to Freedom, Practical Instructions on the Union of Mahamudra and Ati Yoga. And this is by Karma Chagme, who is a lineage holder of both Mahamudra and Dzogchen from the 16th century. And in this particular text, there's commentary by Gyatso Rinpoche and was translated by our director here and my teacher, B. Allen Wallace. So this is the way that it is expressed in this particular text, the four recognitions. Now, all objective appearances are like water and waves. All are apparitions of the mind, and in reality, are unestablished. By realizing this, one recognizes all appearances as mind. So that's the first of the recognitions. By analyzing the essence of the mind in terms of going, staying, and arising, it turns out not to be established as anything. So like horses and elephants in a dream, it is unestablished in reality. By realizing this, one recognizes the mind is empty. Number two. From the state of emptiness, clarity and limpidity and unceasing great joy, it spontaneously arises as manifold appearances, like the moon's reflections in water. By realizing this, one recognizes emptiness as spontaneous actualization. This is the third recognition. And then the fourth. Thus, from simple spontaneous actualization, arising and release occur spontaneously, without wavering from immutable great bliss that is clear, empty, spontaneous, and free from elaboration, like a snake that unravels its own knots. By ascertaining this, one recognizes spontaneous actualization as liberated. One recognizes spontaneous actualization as self-liberating. These four recognitions present the essential view of Mahamudra in 4 steps, showing the unfolding of realization from dualistic perception to complete freedom, the entire path of Mahamudra. And Trungpa Rinpoche summarizes these 4 in his book, Essentials of Mahamudra, saying, first, you see that the outer world and inner thoughts are both mind. Then you see that mind itself cannot be found. It is empty. Yet that emptiness is luminous, giving rise to all experience. And finally, when that is recognized, everything that arises frees itself without effort. These 4 summarize the whole Mahamudra path in fruition. So this whole Mahamudra path of and fruition would be a lot to talk about today. So I would like to just focus on the first of these recognitions. And that is, again, all objective appearances are like waves in water. All are apparitions of the mind, and in reality are unestablished. By realizing this, here's the pith. One recognizes all appearances as the mind. And then the Ninth Karmapa expands on that by saying, the appearances of form, sound, and so on are none other than the mind's display. They have never existed outside of consciousness. When we look at appearance, we find it is simply the mind experiencing itself as object. Recognizing this, we cut the fixation on external reality. So this recognition that all appearances are mind is intended to dissolve the dualism of outer and inner and the distinction between outer and inner. What seems external, everything that we perceive in the world and all of our friends and enemies and all of our pets and everything else that we adore, and sometimes other things that we loathe, all of this arises within knowing. And appearances are mind's luminosity, vivid, clear, and knowable. So that's what we are hoping to, with our practice, to recognize that all appearances are mind's luminosity. Of the 3 approaches, that is, to insight practices that the Ninth Karmapa presents in these 2 texts, foremost shamatha practice on the cushion really prepares us wonderfully for looking at the mind within stillness, and the second one, looking at the mind within occurrence. Because the whole point of shamatha practice is, depending on whether the type of practice that you're doing in shamatha, but there's an evolution of the practice from working with signs or working with external objects, really, or such as a stick, a stone, or an image of a Buddha, or the breath, actually, all external objects, those are, or that you are focusing on. And that evolves towards then shamatha without a sign. And in shamatha without a sign, you eventually develop as a practice awareness of awareness, where you are just the object, really, of your awareness is the whole phenomena of awareness itself. And so these shamatha practices really are excellent preparation for the Vipassana practices, these first 2 of the 3, looking at the mind within stillness and looking at the mind within occurrence. But when I first encountered these teachings about 15 years ago, It was the third one, looking at the mind within appearances, that I instantly wanted to apply as a post meditation practice rather than being on the cushion. The allure of this practice that was so exciting was to take this out into the wild and to practice with all of the appearances that you meet while you are no longer on the cushion. And this period of post meditation practice is extremely important, because no matter how much practice you make on the cushion, if your post meditation is a return to an ordinary, distracted, afflicted mind, then your practice is going to be like climbing a ski slope on a mountaintop or on a mountain to reach the top. And if you have ever done that, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's like trying to climb a slope of ball bearings, typically in, for instance, the Sierra range. This would be decomposing granite, and they're all this gravel that finds an angle of repose in a gully, for instance, and it looks like it's the easiest, most clear way to get up to the top of a ridge or something like that. But as you take one step forward, you slide back, take another step forward, and you slide back. And so it is just a very frustrating experience in which you can put in a lot of effort, but don't really make any progress. And so this is a good analogy, I think, for what can be your experience if you, during your post meditation practice, and for most of us who are not in a serious long-term retreat, that is whatever 80% of our day or 90% is going to be off the cushion. And so clearly, if you are just resting in and practicing an ordinary, distracted, and afflicted mind during that time, you're going to be undoing all of the practice and the progress that you might have made in your practice on the cushion. And Dakpo Tashi Namgyal explains in another classic meditation text of Mahamudra, his Moonbeams of Mahamudra, that post-meditation is where recognition becomes familiar. And so recognition is exactly these four recognitions that the Ninth Karmapa was describing. And it's in the post-meditation practice, Dakpo Tashi Namgyal is emphasizing here, that the recognitions really become stable. So he writes in his text, during meditation, the mind abides one-pointedly. So this would be if you are resting in shamatha. After meditation, mindfulness must be sustained so that whatever arises is recognized as the play of mind itself. If recognition is lost, one should renew it again and again. And he adds that the key is not to reject appearances or to try to keep stillness artificially. That would be the temptation in a shamatha practice. And I have known shamatha practitioners that are really reluctant to actually come out of their cabin. They really take the approach of being in a cave meditator in Tibet, and that somehow appearances are the enemy, and automatically that any appearance is going to be, or especially appearances can be overwhelming, and that so they are to be avoided at all cost. But in Mahamudra, that approach actually is not taken, especially in Vipassana practice. And he adds that so not to reject appearances or to try to keep stillness artificially, so not grasping to or clinging to the stillness that you might have attained in your shamatha practice. But the key is to recognize the same empty clarity in movement and perception. And so this is the challenge. Can you take that stillness of mind that you acquired in your shamatha practice on the cushion and apply that, recognize that same empty clarity in the midst of movement and the hurly-burly appearances of perception in the modern world? So that is the challenge that we're going to try to develop some skills with today in our practice. And post-meditation also is important because this is really what bridges the gap between meditation and life, so that insight continues in the midst of movement, speech, and thought. In Mahamudra, the goal isn't to remain in blank meditation, but it's to recognize that everything that appears is the display of mind's nature. You begin to experience thoughts, perceptions, and all the interactions of your daily life as awareness itself. And so over time, the boundary between meditation and post-meditation dissolves. So that is the goal, and that is the way that your practice can really become coherent, and the way that in which you will not be undoing the progress that you have made on the cushion by your habits of distraction and affliction out in the world in which you're spending most of your day. Here's Naropa's pith advice about that. If you grasp meditation as something apart from ordinary experience, you will never find the true Mahamudra. And in the same vein, as Gampopa and the third Karmapa both emphasize, stability of realization depends on familiarization. And that familiarization occurs mainly through post-meditation mindfulness, by repeatedly recognizing mind's nature in ordinary experience. In this way, realization becomes continuous and spontaneous, and every experience is known as the nature of itself. So that is the real key to making progress in our practice overall, is to really focus on the post-meditation practice and to make a continuous awareness of what you had realized or recognized on the cushion. So these appearances that we're talking about actually refers to two aspects of experience, and those are experienced either as externally apparent objects and those that are experienced within your mind. The external appearances consist mostly of the objects of the five senses, and internal appearances include all of the mental images of what is experienced by the senses, and also all of the concepts that we generate about these sensory experiences. The whole gamut of pain and suffering and pleasure and joy, all the negative states of mind, such as kleshas, and the positive states of mind, such as love and compassion. But whether we're working with external physical appearances or internal mental appearances, the Vipassana technique is to look at their nature. But it can be more challenging to look at the nature of external physical appearances simply because we have such a deeply entrenched habit of seeing them as separate from our minds. Internal appearances, it's clear that these are mental experiences, but the external ones, it is a connate experience, meaning that we were born with this. And it's something that we have to train ourselves to experience them as something other than the way that a naive realist sees things, as the world being totally separate from us, and that our job as perceivers is to just get a clue, unbiased perception of what is truly out there. If that's the case, then we're doing a good job as a perceiver. We're seeing truly, if we can see it without the bias of our upbringing or our habits of perception. And so we can see as a quote scientist would see things as they truly are out there in the world. But that is the delusion that we are trying to cut through here with our Mahamudra Vipassana practices. As the Royal Seal of Mahamudra states, all appearances of the six consciousnesses are the display of one's own awareness. To take them as truly existing external things is delusion. To recognize them as the play of mind is wisdom. It's interesting to think, really, why is it that we are habituated to the delusion of an external world that exists in the way that we actually perceive it? And it's a very compelling discussion in some areas of cognitive science now, that it could be because this delusion is actually adaptive and favored by natural selection. One of the most cogent people in the field, I think, that is describing this is Donald Hoffman, who is a cognitive psychologist and a theorist who thinks a lot about ultimate reality. And in his book, The Case Against Reality, Why Evolution Hid the Truth from Our Eyes, he has this very interesting analogy that I think can be helpful to understand exactly what we're up against when we're dealing with this very entrenched perception that everything that we perceive exists externally from us. So he writes, our perception of snakes and apples, and even of time and space, do not reveal objective reality. How can our senses be useful then? How can they keep us alive if they don't tell us the truth about objective reality? Suppose you're writing an email and the icon for its file is blue, rectangular, and in the center of your desktop. Does this mean that the file itself is blue, rectangular, and in the center of your computer? Of course not. The color of the icon is not the color of the files. Files have no color. The purpose of a desktop interface, he continues, is not to show you the truth of the computer, where truth in this metaphor refers to circuits, voltages, and layers of software. Rather, the purpose of an interface is to hide the truth and to show simple graphic solutions that help you perform useful tasks such as crafting emails and editing photos. If you had to toggle voltages and to craft an email, your friends would never hear from you. This is what evolution has done, he says. It has endowed us with senses that hide the truth and display the simple icons we need to survive long enough to raise offspring. Space, as you perceive it when you look around, is just your desktop, a 3D desktop. Apples, snakes, and other physical objects are simply icons in your 3D desktop. These icons are useful in part because they hide the complex truth about objective reality. So that I think I find a very helpful analogy in understanding why it is that this appearance of external objects as existing truly separate from our minds is so difficult to see through. And this idea is beautifully encapsulated, I think, also by Dujam Rinpoche in these lines of the sadhana, the heart essence of the lake-born Vajra. Ho, to realize beings, the forms created by the confusion of duality, although non-existent, are apparent as the realms of beings. So that's the interesting paradox that we are dealing with here, is trying to see through this fact, or to try to comprehend it and actually recognize it. This fact that although these appearances are non-existent, they are apparent. They are both apparent as the realms of beings, and they have no ultimate reality. So that's what we're trying to experience directly, and not just conceptually. Earlier, I said that post-meditation mindfulness is what bridges the gap between meditation and our daily life. Even for experienced meditators, I know, and you may also, that during the time we're off the cushion and dealing with our families and coworkers and all of the other demands of our busy lives, our lives can be laced with mental afflictions that lead to what the affective psychologist Paul Ekman calls regrettable episodes. The one thing that all mental afflictions have in common, my teacher, Lama Ellen Wallace, emphasizes, the one thing that all these mental afflictions have in common is reification. And this is a reification of the object that we take as the external cause of our attachment and aversion. And because we see these things as truly external of us, we cling to them, we want to possess them if they are making us, we see them as a cause of happiness, or we repel them and push them away and try to bury them or destroy them if we feel them as a cause of our unhappiness. So if we are a naive realist and see everything as external of our minds, everything that appears to us as external, then our whole march towards happiness, our pursuit of happiness, really becomes managing all of the things that we perceive out there, our friends and our enemies. But if we can see the truth of what our teachers are telling us here, that all of these appearances are mind, then we have a different approach to recognizing genuine happiness. So to realize the potential that working with appearances in our post-meditation practice has to deflate these mental afflictions, it's important to know that Mahamudra distinguishes post-meditation mindfulness from the ordinary mindfulness that we are practicing with earlier in our practice careers. In the early stages of practice, mindfulness is often translated or described as a remembering or recollection. Remembering is better in this sense because we're using recollection differently in the rest of this talk. So it's mindfulness is described early as remembering, which is keeping the mind from wandering away from its chosen meditation object, such as the breath or a visualization. So this is in the early stages of shamatha practice, it is, first of all, directing your attention to a chosen object rather than letting our minds just go off to any objects that it would like to and go wandering with it, which is what all the advertising stimulation is intended to do, is to send our minds wandering off in the direction of their product. But so we, in shamatha practice early, we direct our attention first to a chosen object, and then we train to sustain our minds where we have placed them. And this is the role of mindfulness. As again, Dakpo Tashi Namgyal explains in his Moonbeams on Mahamudra, or Moonbeams of Mahamudra, that is. In the beginning, he says, mindfulness is the faculty that remembers the object and prevents forgetfulness and wandering. But when recognition of the mind's nature has arisen, mindfulness no longer depends on remembering. It becomes a self-sustaining awareness that knows itself. He continues, this is not a mindfulness that remembers something other than itself. It is the continuity of knowing that is itself luminous and empty. Such mindfulness does not involve effort or contrivance. And later he clarifies this, saying, if after meditation you simply remain mindful of that same nature of awareness, without following thoughts or rejecting appearances, then mindfulness is inseparable from Mahamudra itself. So this indicates that in the beginning, mindfulness has a dualistic function. It recalls an object that you have chosen to direct your attention to, and then it returns to it again and again when you have left the object. So it guards against forgetfulness and distraction. And this is very foundational in the practice of shamatha, but is still within conceptual training. And once you've recognized or even had glimpses of the nature of mind in meditation, empty, luminous, and knowing, then post-meditation mindfulness is no longer about remembering an object that is different from itself. Instead, it's about not losing the natural continuity of that recognition. And this is also, it's very important to recognize that our recognition of this empty, luminous, and knowing mind is not necessarily going to happen as one explosion of realization in which you're forever different afterwards. But it can happen incrementally and with these glimpses, as if you're getting a glimpse of the full moon for an instant and then it's covered by clouds again. But it's actually the moon that you saw, but for a brief period of time. And so it's very important to recognize and cherish without grasping, without attachment to these glimpses, but to really value them as a true experience. And then when we are able to do that, we actually will be able to practice this mindfulness that is being described here in this way as just a continuity of that awareness in post-meditation. And when we are able to do that, then we will really be able to make progress in the stability of that realization. And Moonbeams actually offers a very practical pointer for how to cultivate that mindfulness. Here, Dakpo Tashi Namgyal says, during post-meditation, do not fix the mind or reject appearances. Simply recognize whatever arises as the same awareness you knew in meditation. And he adds that if recognition fades, do not be discouraged. Renew mindfulness gently, and again, release effort. So obviously we are going to, in our post-meditation, we are not instantly at the very beginning, especially when we are working at the level of the first yoga, single-pointedness of Mahamudra, that we are not going to always be successful in cultivating that continuity of recognition in our post-meditation practice. But so the mindfulness is really recognizing that we are seeing things in an ordinary way again, reifying all these external appearances, and then returning gently to that recognition that you had a glimpse of earlier in your practice on the cushion. And so this is the goal, and the way that we actually make progress is to return to the recognition frequently until it becomes natural and uncontrived. And eventually the distinction between meditation and post-meditation dissolves entirely and becomes self-sustaining awareness. Well, that is quite a lot to think about for a bit. Laura, we have talked about having a break. And so why don't we take a break now? And then we will come back and do a meditation that really puts this together with some very practical instructions about how to recognize this and how to stabilize the recognition. I could go off into a couple of other areas, especially on the four yogas Mahamudra, but I think that it might be better for our meditation if we keep it focused on these basic ideas that I've discussed already. How long shall we take a break?
Yeah, when would you like to come back?
How about in 15 minutes or 14 minutes at the top of the hour at 9 o'clock?
Okay.
So we will have about a half-hour meditation then. Actually, probably 24 minutes is the length that I like to do, which is called the Gataka, and I'll explain that later. But and then we will have time for questions and my attempt at a response to those questions afterwards also. So if anything arose in your mind as uncertain, or I wasn't very clear about what I was describing, you can go ahead and ask that as for a clarification later after the meditation. So see you at, I said 9 o'clock. I'm looking at my time here, which is 2 hours different than yours. So that would be 11 o'clock, I believe, right?
Yeah, 11 if you're on the East Coast.
Okay. So see you then.
Okay.
Are we ready to begin again?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Okay. This section of our talk will be a guided meditation, and just a few comments about meditation practice in general, in case this is different from what you may have heard or experienced or practiced before. And first of all, the length of time that we are going to be practicing here in this session will be 24 minutes. This is called a Ghataka in ancient India. And this was recommended by Kamala Shila as in the Bhavana Kramana as a good length of time to start. In ancient India, the length of the day was not divided into 24 60-minute periods, but it was divided into 60 24-minute periods. So this is like meditating for an Indian hour. We get a bonus here. You could say that you have meditated for an Indian hour here, but if you want to meditate for a day, you have to meditate for 60 hours. So the length of this 24-minute session is a good length of time because it's, for most people, it's not too long and it's not too short. So you want to keep in mind one of the cardinal rules or pieces of advice with meditation practice, especially in the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions, is short, frequent sessions, and to always quit meditating while you still want to meditate. So this is similar to Ernest Hemingway's advice to young writers: always quit writing while there is water still in the well. And this is very good advice because if you push too long in your meditation session, you're going to become dull and or distracted. But anyway, you will lose the intensity of your meditation, and then that can become a habit of your meditation practice. So there is real virtue in following this advice to always quit while you still want to meditate, and to really focus on short, frequent sessions. And then you just naturally increase the length of your sessions as your capacity for maintaining a balance of relaxation and stability and clarity, these three, maintaining this balance during the entire length of your meditation practice. So that's the goal that you should have for that. And then also, in this immediate lineage of Lama Alan Wallace, we practice in 4 different meditation positions. So it's not just the seated position, cross-legged on a cushion, but also Shavasana is a very good practice position because the goal, first of all, or the requirement, really, first of all, of a meditation posture is that it be comfortable so that you can maintain it through the entire length of your practice session without becoming fidgety or needing to adjust your position because it's uncomfortable. So you should choose a position, and this could be, as Buddhaghosa said in his seminal meditation text, that we can meditate sitting, lying down, walking, or standing. And so it's really, and he recommends that you actually practice in all of those and find out which one is going to work the best for you. And it could be, if you are practicing multiple sessions in a day, as if you were in retreat, then that you will be switching from one position to another, depending on what your body is asking of you in that particular session. So short, frequent sessions and a comfortable position is the most important, or 2 very fundamental things to keep in mind as you choose your meditation or prepare for your meditation. Okay, so this will be a 24-minute guided meditation. So find your comfortable position. The deeper we go in our meditation practice, the more important is this entry into the practice, which is recommended by Padmasambhava. And this is the ever so simple but the profound practice of settling your body, speech, and mind in their natural states. So, to begin your practice, settle the body in its natural state. Here, you keep your eyes at least partially open and let your unfocused gaze rest vacantly in the space in front of you. And let your awareness descend from your head, where you have been thinking about perhaps all of these concepts that I have been talking about earlier in the session. And now let your awareness descend from your head into your body and settle the body in its natural state, which is relaxed, still, and vigilant. You promote relaxation with awareness of sensations within the body. If your awareness discovers tension or pain in part of your body, let your breath be drawn to that spot as if that spot was doing the inhaling. And then release the tension on the exhalation into space. The aspect of stillness is promoted by your comfortable position. And vigilance, which is a very alert attention, is supported by an erect posture. So even if you are lying down, your spine is straight, allowing the subtle energies to flow within your body unimpeded. And you settle the breath in its natural state of effortless silence by first surrendering all control over the breath. You don't prefer that the breath be long or that it be short. You simply allow the respiration to settle in its own natural rhythm. Let the body breathe itself. And allow the conversation in your mind to settle into effortless silence by releasing thoughts, distracting images, or memories that arise. Release them on each out breath into space. And settle the mind in its natural state by resting in the effortless freshness of this present moment. Give up the obsession with the past and infatuation with the future and simply rest in the fresh, unlimited potential of now. And now, with your mind balanced between relaxation, stability, and clarity, devote your full attention to the external appearance of sound. Something that you're hearing, hopefully other than my voice. And let your total experience of sound be what your sense of hearing is providing. In the herd, let there be only the herd, as Buddha instructed, Bahia, in a core teaching on mindfulness. How long can you stay with only the sense of sound before the conceptual mind begins to elaborate it? One of the first elaborations you will notice, if you're attentive, is that you either like it or you don't like it. This sound that you're hearing, this external appearance. The unelaborated sound occurs in the here and now, but thoughts about them take you away from the present. Does identifying and giving a name to the sound change the initial experience of the sound? Can you see with something as simple as sound how you dream an illusory thing into existence by giving it qualities that you like or don't like? Don't try to suppress the thing. Just recognize it for what it is. a dream image. Let this dream image, let it be, and then let it go. Let's shift our focus now to the more challenging sensory domain of the eye consciousness. So this would be a simulation of post-meditation practice, as if you were out walking about your neighborhood with your eyes wide open. Focus on some object in your visual field. It could be big or it could be small, it doesn't matter. Focus on the details of the object. And now relax this focus so that you're not seeing any one thing clearly within your visual field. But it's as if your entire visual field becomes peripheral vision. This peripheral vision will reduce the vividness of visual appearances. And can encourage the recognition that what is appearing visually is a mental experience. Alternate for a time between focusing on the object with all its details and the unfocused gaze of peripheral vision. Does focusing on the details of a thing promote the fixation on the apparent separateness of what you are seeing? Don't let this become a logical analysis of sense perception. Simply observe with relaxed, stable, and vivid awareness your experience of what appears as an external visual object. Is your experience of the object actually one part experienced object and one part experiencing cognition? Can you observe the relationship between your mind and the objects that appear to it? How do you experience this object of visual perception? Do you experience the mind and what it experiences as different or as the same? Is this experiencing cognition and what it experiences the same, or are they different? Again, alternate between focusing on the object with all its details and relaxing the focus. When your vision is unfocused, there are still appearances. You are still seeing things. But in your unfocused experience, is there less a distinction between the apprehended object and the apprehending cognition? If appearances are in some way separate from the mind, then how do they arise within the mind? Do they arise in the mind like a reflection arising on the surface of a mirror? Or is the mind projecting outward as an appearance? In other words, when external objects appear to you, Do the appearances enter your mind? Or does the mind somehow go out and enter the appearance? And if they are separate, where is the meeting point between the appearances and the experiencing mind? Is there some sort of observable boundary between external and internal? If you look at this object that you are focused on in the way a small child would look at the images in a temple, that is, without identifying or being able to name any of the things it sees, do you nonetheless see things clearly? Do you see the object? Does the object appear the same even when you are not superimposing a conceptual designation of the thing as being this or that? Can you experience the instant that you overlay an identity on the object and realize that a child in the temple might overlay a different identity on the same appearance? Can you observe that while external appearances do appear as objects, they are nevertheless empty of true, inherent, or independent existence as this or that? It is said that appearances appear while being empty. Can you actually view this unity of appearance and emptiness rather than just conceive of it? When you look inward at this mind that experiences these objects, can you find an experiencing thing or a being anywhere at all? What we are really looking at here is not the object, but the nature or essence of the experience of the object, which is the unity of emptiness and luminosity. We're using here the experience of visual perception as an opportunity to discover or reveal the mind's nature, to see the emptiness that is inseparable from the vividness of the perceptual experience. As you are meditating, neither the perceived object nor the perceiving mind disappears. And yet, can you find anything in either that exists separately from the other? There is nothing in the mind to fix upon as truly existent, not as a truly existent subject, yet the mind still experiences appearances. This non-duality of appearance and mind is held to be the authentic experience or recognition of the mind within appearances. The exalted Gotsangpa taught, forms are the non-duality of appearance and emptiness. By simply resting without any fixation directly on a form, the apprehended object and apprehending subject will be liberated in their own place. Rest in vivid awareness, never separated from the reality that all appearances are the display of that awareness. And refine your mindfulness so that the moment appearances arise to you, you recognize them and simultaneously see their nature. Simply rest in the luminous immediacy of the present moment. Let that be sufficient. That concludes our meditation session. Slowly and gently return your awareness to the place that you are in. And with that description of Mahamudra mindfulness, try to maintain whatever recognition you may have found during this meditation in your post-meditation. As the experience of your meditation or anything that I discussed with you in the talk before raised any questions in your mind?
Dan, I see your hand. I'm going to make sure that you can unmute. Yeah, you can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, it's two things that you said really close to the end of the meditation. I'm going to repeat them as best I can, but I don't think it's accurate. It was forms are the appearance of the non-dual emptiness and luminosity, something close to that.
Yeah,
And then right after that, refine your mindfulness. So when you see an appearance, you simultaneously see their appearance and their nature. But I want to make sure I have them accurately.
you got that accurately, yes. How did you do that?
I don't know. Because I'm so interested in this.
Yeah,
You
that's
said
exactly right.
so forms are the appearance of the non-dual emptiness and luminosity.
Yeah,
So that was right.
correct. So that is the ultimate nature of external appearances that we are trying to recognize, is that these forms, whether it be of any of the five senses, are actually not internally, or I'm sorry, inherently and self-existently separate from the perceiving mind. And so the point in the Mahamudra practice here is to use these appearances as a way of recognizing the emptiness and luminosity of the mind that is apprehending these appearances as well. And what we recognize then is that the appearance and the mind itself that is apprehending these appearances, there is a non-duality of emptiness and luminosity. So it is not just that the appearances are empty and the mind is empty, but that there is this non-dual experience, a knowing cognition that is the true nature, the authentic recognition of the nature of both mind and appearance as being non-dual.
So just to, I don't know whether this is playing devil's advocate or not, but this is not at the same time, this is not saying that there is nothing external.
Correct. So that would be the extreme of nihilism, wouldn't it?
Right. Okay.
And so we want to be very careful to say that that we are not proposing that there is nothing except my mind, which would be
Right.
solipsism. So all of you are just an elaborate imagination that I am experiencing right now, and how wonderful it is, how imaginative my mind is. But it's actually, if you go back to that, remember that quote from Donald Hoffman that described our experience of the sensory world as being like icons that have the role actually of obscuring the complexity of reality. And I deleted from the end of that quotation a very interesting point that he raises, or question. He says, so if it's true that the role of sense perception is to hide the complexity of reality, what then is the underlying reality? And he concludes, he answers his own question by saying, I don't know. But that is the point of our Mahamudra experiment, is to be able to answer that question.
Yeah, that analogy of the icons, I thought is really good. It's really good.
I found that very helpful also.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Hey, Richard.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you, Doug, for this wonderful presentation and meditation. I'm going to preface this question by saying that I'm aware that it probably could be easy to exaggerate subtle differences between Mahamudra and Dzogchen. But as a relative beginner with both, it seems to me that perhaps in terms of methodology, Mahamudra is more apt to work with, if you will, the appearances or objects per se. And perhaps Dzogchen goes right, if you will, directly more to the, I don't know, awareness itself. That probably sounds vague, but I'd be grateful if you would either disagree or agree and maybe elaborate a bit.
Oh, thank you for your question, Richard. So I don't know that there's a great deal of difference actually in the presentations. And in this area anyway. And so most Dzogchen and Mahamudra masters, and it's amazing the number of great lamas that are lineage holders actually in both traditions. Normally, I have heard this described as being that there is really no distinction, meaningful distinction anyway, between the presentations of Dzogchen and Mahamudra in most of the path. The Mahamudra experience of the four yogas of Mahamudra really would culminate with the cutting, what in Dzogchen would be cutting through to pristine awareness, I believe. And the one thing that really distinguishes Dzogchen practice from Mahamudra and all other Vajrayana practices is this Tukgyal practice at the very end, in which you are working with very subtle experiences of lights and energies that are related to a particular channel that is not described in any other Vajrayana practice. But the teachings that I've received from Lama Ellen Wallace, who got all of his teachings from primarily from Gyatro Rinpoche, who is a lineage holder of the Peo lineage, which is a lineage that includes both Mahamudra and Dzogchen, says that through the point of cutting through to pristine awareness, that the paths are not really distinguished meaningfully. And the one thing that I appreciate greatly about Mahamudra, though, is the way that and the detail of the meditation manuals that have been developed over the centuries since Mahamudra was brought to Tibet and from the base lineage of Talopa. So that is what I really find beneficial in Mahamudra, is the detail of the meditation experience found in these extraordinary manuals, like from the Ninth Karmapa and Dakpo Tashi Namgyal.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I have a question, Doug.
Sure.
As someone who has come to this tradition via like insight meditation communities initially, I'm curious how you perceive, or if there are any differences between shamatha and vipassana in the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions and the Theravadan tradition. There have been times where it has seemed really radically different to me, and now it seems like it maybe is exactly the same thing.
Well, you might be in a better position to answer that question than I am, because I have had teachings in the Theravadan tradition, or the foundational traditions or lineages, that have been presented not by their side, from their side, but from the side of Gelug's and Dzogchen and Lama Ellen Wallace, about what they are saying about the Theravadan traditions. And of course, Hatha Yoga includes all of those teachings of the foundational traditions, as taught by the Buddha And I think that the meditation practices themselves are very, very similar. And I can't say about I wouldn't dare to speak for insight meditation in the contemporary manifestation of it. But in the Theravadan approach, you see extraordinary detailed presentation of breath meditation, for instance, and how in Buddhaghosa there are very fine and nuanced descriptions of meditations that using what would be called shamatha with a sign, and then primarily, and I think that's what most people think of. But then the Buddha also described working with the mind itself as an object. So that would be very much like a Mahamudra or Dzogchen taking the mind as the path or taking awareness as the path. So I think those are very similar. And the place that we would really find distinctions then would be not in that basic approach to shamatha or the developing the stillness and clarity of shamatha, but in the Vipassana practice and what the goal is in recognizing the nature of mind. And so I think that in the Theravadan tradition, there is not the great discussion about the emptiness of all phenomena and the nature of mind and the non-duality of emptiness and mind, and that, of the non-duality of appearance and mind, and that really assuming that we can take at face value external appearances. And so the real distinction, I think, between the practices or the lineages would be in the view of ultimate reality and how inclusive that is.
Thank you. That's helpful. Yeah.
Well, if there are no other questions, I will just conclude then by saying thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the Sangha that has grown around Lama Willa and the Natural Dharma Fellowship. And I have taught at Wonderwell a number of times, and I am very appreciative of the extraordinary facility that you have created and maintained there for authentic Dharma practice. And just end by saying I wish you all well with your practice. I hope this has been in some way beneficial, and that maybe another time we can get together again.